people ask like, do you have any Lightroom tips? And honestly, every picture you're going to do different things as far as editing goes. So what I found was just kind of, I think I've said this in my meeting reads, it's kind of like a mixing pot to experiment. And you could save something if you did it, but what you'll actually end up finding out is that things that work for one image will never work again on another. So right there, I'm going to go back to here. So both those shots were indoors. This is from Brianna's album shoot. This was in Vegas, and this was a kind of close to the one that was used for her cover, but this one, I just had a very surreal feeling about it in this position when I saw it sideways on the camera. So again, this is a raw file, black and white. You could do things like that. Warner, if you could post the link for Nick Color Effects. So in Lightroom, you have a way to edit photos, obviously, but you also have a way to edit in external programs. So this right here is Nick Color Effects, which Warner just flashed, I saw. So what this does, it lets you create a copy of an image and then let you edit it externally. Actually, I'm not sure if that's popping up on the screen for you guys. Let me see, sorry. Okay, yeah. So this external shot's not editing, but you get the point. So in these other programs that work with Lightroom, you could edit the photo even further and save a copy of it, puts it back into Lightroom, and then you could compare. So say you made the changes on one, just an example. Obviously, this would be different if I went ahead with the full edit. I don't want to bore you guys with nothing to see. So you can compare and see what you did, see what worked, see what didn't. This is Misha's, and he is doing a magical handstand. So this is again a raw file. This is at a show. I think this was. I'm not even going to try to guess. Honestly, there's been so many. So here we can. When I took this, it happened literally within 1 second. And he said, "Oh, need you to take a shot." And I said, "What are you going to do?" And he said, "Watch." So I was ready. He did this. He fell on his face, of course. And this was the 1 second that he wasn't falling. So what I did with this one was turn it upside down because it was a unique kind of perspective. Once you crop it, you could obviously get rid of the hideous convention rugs and then just make some simple adjustments on it. Again, I'm doing this really quick. I would take my time a little bit more. So again, one thing as far as Lightroom and learning, YouTube is a great resource for editing techniques, processes. One quick thing I could show is, if you guys see this, I'm not big into manipulating photos to make them completely different than they were, because that's not how I remember them. But something like this, where who knows if that's Misha's filling from his tooth or whatever that is, but you could clone it and voila, it has gone. So this was probably from a fan's feather boas. And if you clone and heal, either one. Generally, I like heal because it pulls pixels from around, so it doesn't look so obvious. And again, get rid of that. So yeah. So again, you could, in Lightroom, you can turn it to black and white. You could edit in external programs. You have so much power, which is kind of game changing from what this was. If anyone's starting out now, you're kind of coming in at a time where things are much easier because digital photography has taken off the way it has. Where when I first started, going back 15 years, film was still being used, and there was a big pushback from film photographers that never wanted to switch to digital because they felt it was kind of cheapening the art of photography, where in a sense it was just reluctant to change, which is kind of a theme of these days. But yeah, so once you edit, you go back to Lightroom, and that's your, images are collected here. I can't show you guys my folders and stuff because I'd have to share a desktop and it would be a mess. But basically, Lightroom is great for organizing, and I'll get into that later. So let's get back. Why don't you switch it back? Woo! What is the strangest, funniest picture? That is a hard one to think about, right off the bat, because I've been doing this for so long. I do tend to lean towards strange things. So what may be strange to someone is not so much strange to me. Oh, look at Borja in the chat. Hilarious. Who of the cast misbehaves the most during photos? That depends on the show. Yeah, unfortunately, with how long we haven't been doing the shows, I've realized how much I do miss them, and I miss everyone here as well. But it's misbehaving. I mean, it goes from show to show. It could be, generally because of my relationship with them, I don't really see anyone so much in a terrible bad mood. So it's generally goofing around, and there's with all the shows I've done, I think I've done over probably 800 to 900 conventions from different shows. So Supernatural, it's over 100, many hundred, 120, 130, and sometimes Misha, sometimes Jared. Jensen is usually the kind of the one who gets everyone in order kind of thing. But we all, have such a unique relationship that I've said it before, how lucky I am to have been part of something as unique as this, and a magical group of everyone from the actors to the fans to, something that'll never happen again and never should happen again. That's Hope. Hi, Hope. Is there anywhere in the world you haven't been to that you would love to take photos? That's a great question. Probably New Zealand, Norway. I've never been to Australia. I've never been to Japan. So there's a lot of places, but New Zealand, I am a huge Lord of the Ring nerd, and so to get there would be great, especially with my kids and my wife to go. Mike, Billy, and I, we play some cowboy escapades online on a Red Dead game, and Mike just posted my screen tag. Hilarious. How did I get hired by Creation? I'm sure some of you guys know. Long story short, Creation was doing conventions since 1972, and they had a comic book store, a chain of them in New York. They're from Queens originally, and I think they had 3 or 4 stores in the 80s, and then they had a store by my elementary school, which I used to actually leave school if I could imagine my son jumping through a window to climb in and go to a comic book store during lunch. That is what I did. And at one time they had a help wanted sign in the window. My mother was in between jobs, and I told her, I said, you got to work in the comic store. That's the place to be. And it was actually for Adams. He's one of the owners of Creation, for his assistant. She started there, I think, in 86. And I did my first convention when I was 14 in 88, Star Wars show in California, and got to see something, especially Star Wars, because I was, that was my game, that was my stuff. So getting to touch the real R2D2 and that play with the AT-ATs from the Empire Strikes Back was amazing. So that was my intro. So she started there in 86. We started doing Star Trek conventions for Next Generation in the early 90s. And I think I was doing over 40, 50 shows a year with her, just traveling with Creation. So that was amazing to see America. And I think got in my blood as far as my love of traveling and getting to see America and Canada. My mom was Canadian, so I had a connection up in Toronto also. So getting to go to shows, to have my grandmother come to, it was great. So that was a start. And as far as photography goes, I think they started doing photos at conventions in probably the early 2000s, and it was done on a crappy little camera, and the camera was terrible, and everyone was in chairs, and it was a background with heads behind you, like the vinyl background, so you couldn't really find your head. And when they asked me to do some of the shows on the East Coast, I said no problem. I said, but I need to do it my way, which was kind of the start of playing music there, because I can't work without music, and music is key to anyone that's been I think to other shows can compare to the difference it makes in the fact that people can't hear your conversation with whoever you're there to see, to lightening the mood, to lightening the actor's mood, that kind of breaks down the barrier of, in a way, awkwardness, where you're sharing a song that's going on, but at the same time it could lead to something like Misha dancing with you. So for me, that was integral to making it work. And if someone says like, why do you play the music, and that's the reason why, is that it leads to spontaneous things that you'll always remember. What is Norton saying? Yeah, so I bombed their chat in the stream, in the Nerds and Beyond, and they're trying to pay me back, but it's not working. Great. La, da, 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 da. I love the band and Mike and everyone, and Steve a little bit. Is it surreal when people ask you to be in the photo with them? No, I'm flattered. I with how many shows I've done, in my relationship with the fans, it's amazing to know that how much I'm appreciated, but it's still flattering to be in, and I'm happy to jump in, except when Misha gives me a wedgie. Do my family have a dark room in the house? Yes. My dad was he was in Vietnam. My uncle was in the Korean War, and they both were heavily into photography. So I had that, in my, background. But as far as, me leading into photography, my dad didn't do it for a living. But it's just I had a band, and after my band broke up, it led me to wanting to do something creatively without having the personalities to deal with in a band. And it was, just kind of fell into place. Yeah, so my dad did have a dark room, and my mom used to complain all the time because the chemicals would come from the basement to upstairs, and I think she was worried her birds were gonna die from it. But yeah, so what happened was, my dad, he took pictures when I was born, and there's, hundreds of shots of me from around birth to 3 years old, and then there was just one every birthday. And I always wondered, like, did they just lose interest in me or something? But what happened was my dad lost the dark room because he needed to use that room for something else. So he lost the motivation to take photos like he did, because he couldn't control the images like he could in the past with the dark room. So, being able to take your pictures, develop them in the dark room, see them materialize in the, hanging on the clothing line and things like that. He didn't feel comfortable sending them away. So he kind of lost that motivation. But yeah, that was that. Jen asked, which of your icons was I most nervous to meet? Being, part of, this kind of world for so long, you kind of get immune to that and realize that, everyone is, amazing at what they do, and they're ultimately just, human, regular people like everyone else, like us. And I never really was, nervous about it. I mean, a couple of times was probably the first time with Shatner and Leonard Nimoy. because I had a Star Trek lunchbox. So getting to photograph to get them together and see their interactions with each other, and I developed a really close relationship with both, but specifically Leonard Nimoy, who reminded me of my grandfather quite a bit, and he was a photographer, so we would always share that. And obviously he passed, but he was a great guy. And yeah, that was probably the first time I was a little queasy. Who my favorite photographers and whose work do I enjoy? I'm honestly terrible with names. I'm drawn to, I love black and white photography, and I have, different magazines, different books that come with black and white images, but I'm not great at names and things like that. It's mostly the images that I tend to remember, post names. But I do, as far as photography goes, black and white for me is my favorite. After taking pictures during a convention, what do I do besides sleep? I think everyone knows after a show how they feel. The adrenaline wears off on Monday, probably Sunday night, but also Monday. And, I know it's a tendency to be incredibly sad at the end because you realize that it's ended. But for me, like Monday, I literally feel like a truck hit me. I think I end up doing 12 to 14 miles a day of my little steps I do back and forth and walking around, my little shuffle, which everyone makes fun of, which is great, especially the guys. But people ask about that, when my positioning and stance and what I do. It's basically positioning myself to be as steady as I can, because of the fact I don't use a tripod. And imagine, doing what we do at shows with a tripod where you had to stand in the same position. If you see, I wonder if you could switch it real quick to back to my screen. Cool. Thanks to Warner, he's amazing. So going back to here, so if you could see, this was a background. Obviously, you guys probably not many have seen when we used to do these backgrounds, because what would happen was, if you could see where Misha's giant hands are, and that's Misha's wallet, and he had 6 cents on him. But if you see, there's that actually what that may be is actually a heel. So I had used these backgrounds because of the fact that I didn't need to. At one point, I'm sure some of you guys remember, we used to have a background light that would be positioned in front of the background, and it would show, especially at Supernatural, because it wasn't like Star Trek where everyone was in one position. People were jumping, people were doing handstands, people were getting wedgies like me. So it was so spontaneous that I realized that I needed to get something that worked for every situation. So it was unique that it wasn't just, stand in front of the background and take the picture, and stand in front of the background and take the picture, where, the atmosphere that I wanted was exactly what was happening. And to be able to photograph that, I realized that I needed, number one, a bigger background, because there were some poses involving, holding the actors back from the fans, or people laying on the floor pretending they were run over, or whatever it was, that I was like, this paper won't work. But I did end up using them for a lot of promo shots, which is going back to this one, which is, this is the original of just a shot. I think this was in Pittsburgh. A lot of times everyone remembers this was a show he had a beard. Oh, that's amazing. So if we go into here, just a quick edit on this. I think Jensen still has this as his Twitter profile, which is funny. I'm just going to try to recreate what that was, because I think I did that at the show. So again, I'm just adjusting the exposure. This is the temperature. So if you guys, in Lightroom, there are controls for temperature, which control the warmth or the coolness of the shot. So a lot of times, you're able to adjust it in case the lighting was a bit wonky. Where the lights I use for shows are actually, they're called Pro Photo is a company. They're from Sweden, one of the top rated lighting companies, and also one of the most consistent lights I've ever used, where I think we've changed the bulb once in 8 years on one of the lights. So yeah, so once we get to here, so if you click on R in Lightroom, it brings up the crop, which you could then crop it. So right there, adjusting the saturation, you can see, oh, that's a little green. It's because this plugin I use, it adds a bit of color balance. So I think that's pretty accurate. So yeah, so right there. So that's that one. So this was from just an example about Lightroom. One great thing. This was from that same show. If you click on the first image and then click on the second, in light, unfortunately, you guys can't see what I'm doing, but I'm trying to explain. But again, you know, sync settings. So once you're in Lightroom, if you have one image and select the other, and if you click sync settings, it allows you to control what you want to sync from one image to the other. So what happened was it cropped Jared for 8:10, but obviously it just needed to be adjusted. So right there. So what this lets you do is be consistent in your editing, especially if you have a group of shots from one specific shoot where the lighting is consistent, where, you know, the one thing that this is not great for is something like concerts, which is unfortunate because obviously we all know how many pictures get taken at a concert. Sometimes I'll end up with, at an average show, 1,600 to 2,000 shots that ends up getting edited down to probably 20 or 30. So if you think about that percentage, it's a lot of editing to go through. But a lot of times the lighting is so, you know, changes so frequently, whether it be colors or brightness or the way the light is behind you or in front of you and you're getting kicked at the same time. It's not great for that. But for something like this, you could see on how it lets you just kind of make things easier. All right, cool. One, you could switch back. Woohoo! After taking pictures during a convention, what do I do? Gamble, visit. I think that's where this started from. But basically, on Monday, I am done. And with how often I'm away during, you know, especially when, you know, summertime, usually when we were doing, I think we peaked at one time at 16 Supernatural shows, and the band included, because they're obviously there from the start. A lot of times we were away, probably almost 50, 60 days from home. So a lot of times when it's over, we are anxious to get home. And, you know, the one good thing is that we don't want to kill each other, because I don't think this would have lasted as long as it has. But yeah, I do, you know, again, traveling is one of my favorite things. So getting to, you know, I'm spoiled that how often and how many places I've been able to go to for work, to see. For a long time, I was, you know, just basically did the work and I did my thing and I left, you know, but I started making a point of trying to take advantage of taking pictures in different cities. Things like the shoot with Ruth that we did, that was literally next to the convention center, and we had planned that out just to do something. I had an idea to, you know, for Ruth to get into kind of a woodsy situation, and I like the way they came out. What's my favorite printer? Funny thing is, I don't actually have a printer at home. The printers that I use for shows were, I found at a photo show in New York, probably in 2008, 2009. Back in the day, we used to actually, I'd have to find photo labs in each city to print the photos. So what would happen was I would do a whole batch of photos, say with Jensen, and then the lab would come to pick up the card, and the pictures wouldn't come back until 11 o'clock at night. So they weren't able to be autographed, but they also a lot of times weren't able to be picked up because everyone wanted to go home. And so I would end up mailing hundreds and hundreds of photos. So I was like, you know, for more than anything, it came down to that. I realized that how many of the fans wanted to get them autographed at the show. So I said, I need to find a way to do it without a lab. And again, going back to, you know, having all the control over the photos from start to finish, because I obviously was controlling the lighting and the background and the atmosphere. And I said, to complete it, I need to be able to control the printing. And I found the printers, and I found the fact that they were, I think they each print 120 an hour. So when we have sometimes 8 going, obviously we could do almost 1,000. And a lot of times, especially at supernatural shows, it's so tight with the time that we have a real kind of, I'm not going to say strict regimen, but Magdiel, who I've worked with a long time, is one of my best friends. That he is amazing at editing, and we edit every photo. And once they're exported, they get printed, and then obviously they get turned around. So many times during a supernatural show, I'll still be, maybe I'll shooting the duo towards probably the third half of it. He'll let me know that the Jensens are done. So, he is, he's amazing. And again, I couldn't do it without him and without all of my crew and the amazing handlers and who don't get enough credit, and the amazing team members, former volunteers, again, who don't get enough credit. But I couldn't do what I do without all of their help. But the printers I use for shows are Shinko, which is Japanese. They are Daisa printers. They are amazing as far as with minimal maintenance. The problem is you need to actually purchase a print license to use them. So you could probably find them for less than 1,000. The paper is sold in rolls. The price varies, but it's reasonable compared to the quality is amazing. I get emails all the time on what type of printers I use, and they want to recreate it at home, and it's not practical because of the weight of the printers are probably 60, 70 pounds each, and then you're dealing with the paper and all that. So in the Misha pick, Warner, if you could switch back, sorry, dude. So in the Misha pick, you got in the short time he was what kind of setting did I use? So again, the settings that I use for conventions are pretty much consistent, where it's always 200th of a second, and the aperture is generally at 7.1. I use a Canon Mark III camera with a 24-70 like a lens, Canon lens, L lens. It's actually the older one, which the newer version of that lens has got more plastic in it. So the older ones are actually preferred by photographers just because they feel just tighter focusing. So this was just those settings, because this works for the fact that I could edit, I can make minimal changes to the exposure if I need to. Obviously, this is set up for lighting at the top. So obviously no one's here because Misha's here. But generally the lighting is set up for up higher, and opposed, probably cutting off at like his belly button. So it was just kind of a spontaneous thing, and we work together really well because obviously he's spontaneous, and they trust me, which is key to photography, especially portraits, where your talent with a camera is incredibly important, but also your personal skills to be able to make that person comfortable, because I think generally 9 out of 10 people hate having their picture taken in a one-on-one situation. So putting that person at ease and having them trust you is key to, getting the shot. I'm just going to go back to Rob. So I think this was in Denver, I think. Yeah. So we went on, there was like this unique parking garage with, if you guys see, this background, a lot of times I see, spots to do, these quick kind of portraits we do, and visualize them blurred out, because that is what the portrait's going to be, and seeing what the angle works. And a lot of times it's just kind of, you don't know if it's going to work or not, and you just roll with it and you see. But here, again, just doing a quick edit. I'm just adjusting so this is Lightroom has everything from, this is controlling the blacks of the image. So the darker, if you see Rob's fancy jacket, So this one I actually would just like to see in black and white. Ah, sorry about that. So one other thing with Lightroom is you have the ability to almost paint settings on the shot. So in Lightroom, again, you guys can look on YouTube if you have Lightroom, or tips and tricks. But the brush tool tricks for Lightroom are pretty valuable because it lets you do things like this. Let me go back to the brush. So you basically, if I'm changing settings right now, but you guys can't see, and I can't see because nothing's actually happening. So what the settings are, it's actually settings for the brush. So as I'm painting right now, I'm just adjusting the background with the brush. So you can see it's making, I think I did probably a 1.5 stop lower exposure for the brush. So whatever it's painting, if you see, just an example, watch Rob's jacket. So right there, that's just showing you what it's doing. Again, this is just a quick thing. I'm not trying to be fancy pants here. So yeah, so that was just a quick brush trick. But again, there's so many, there's so many things in Lightroom. But again, it's such an amazing program for photography, and even for anyone that just has pictures from their phone, because it lets you group them into catalog. I'm just going to go into another folder. So here you could see, this is just an Iceland folder, but you could adjust, thumbnails. You could see everything together, let you organize, get things in order. And one cool thing that I use a lot is quick collection. So if you're in Lightroom, you can, let me just go here. So this was actually, I think we did Brianna's album in probably 15, 20 minutes, and Victoria is amazing. She did all the makeup. I think this may have been the shot that was used. But yeah, so if we go to click an image, and just all you have to do is hit B, the letter B, it adds it to a quick collection. So now you could see the Brianna shot we were just on got added back into Lightroom. So again, it kind of lets you, in a quick way, make your choices on from a shoot. Say it was a concert, you could just quickly go through them and push B on the ones you want to take a second look at, and then not have to go through the whole process of going through them all over and over and over again. So yeah, so why don't you just switch it back? Cool. Haha. How is photo? Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's I'm almost in a way, I don't want to talk about it because it's, there's a lot of variables involved, but, and at times it's frustrating because I know what it's going to be, as far as the book goes, because I have over, probably a good 8 years worth of shots. A lot of them are like concerts, but I have a lot of stuff from backstage, and I think everyone's seen, just like example, like Rob and Rich in the suits with Ruth is Princess Leia in the background. That kind of backstage stuff that you guys don't really get to see, that I know everyone would love to see. But one way or another, it'll be happening. So just have to say, be patient. Do I work outside of conventions? I think someone had asked if I was an employee. I'm actually I don't technically work for Creation. I'm a independent contractor, but I've been on my own for over 12 years, and it's hard to think about not being on my own because of obviously the freedom, and I'm lucky that how amazing my family is to be supportive of something like this, because it would be tough if it wasn't. So as far as work outside of conventions, I take work whenever, a lot of times the conventions are eating up a large part of my year, because I know my schedule pretty much a year in advance on, during non-pandemic times. that I know I'll be in Hawaii in November, or I'll be in Toronto in August, or whatever, or Vegas. So I base my other work around that. But as far as photography, I've been on my own since 2004. My preferred portrait lens is definitely the Leica camera that I have with it's a 50mm lens with a really incredibly ridiculous aperture that lets you get the background, unique, that I showed you guys earlier, the background blur. So it's either that, or actually for Canon, if you guys use Canon or Nikon, each of them have amazing 85mm lenses. They're a bit pricey, but I think you could rent them to try them out. But that was my, I think Matt's headshot was with that lens, not the one I showed you guys here, the one that's used. It's just an amazing lens, and just, it lets you be close, but not, especially with Canon. The benefit for me with the Leica cameras is that they're smaller, so they immediately cut down the intimidation factor to make the, whoever you're photographing more comfortable. But again, I mean, the key for photography, especially for portrait photography, is to be personable with whoever you're photographing, because once you get that barrier down, the pictures will show it. And as far as photography goes, to shoot what you love to shoot, to not, be, off the line of where you want to go with photography. If you do something that you love to do and you end up doing it, changing who you are just because of that, you're going to do it for a job, you start to lose the inspiration to do it. For me, I'd love, especially taking pictures of people I care about. So to do that for you guys, and to do it for, this amazing cast, and it's an amazing thing to be able to do. Yeah. Love you guys. Scout, hilarious Scout. How many artful nude shoots has Norton asked you to do? Norton's not asked me to do any, but he had some kinky ones with his cat that he asked. And yeah, I'm going through the questions. Jared and Elmo costume. Someone asked about computer monitors and graphic cards. That's a great question. I use Apple computers, but there's a company called, I forgot the name of the company, but they make something called Spider, which is an attachment to your computer that you just literally use to put on your monitor, and it does a color balance for your monitor settings. So once you're in Lightroom, you set your settings to that profile, and that will ensure you have accurate colors when you print. Because a lot of times maybe we take something on our phone and we print it at our printer, and the colors look off. So that's basically, as far as the way to print at home and to ensure it's accurate, is to use something like that. I'm going through the questions. Love you guys. What Tickle Me Elmo is my favorite, the regular or the Jared size? Yeah, Tickle Me Elmo gave me nightmares. There was just something very off about his personality. Yeah, someone asked, yeah, there is a book coming. No matter what, it's coming. It's just the logistics are incredibly difficult. There's, obviously all the actors involved. There's there's actors that aren't, part of the conventions anymore that are part of it. So, I mean, they are integral, because we wouldn't be where we are without a lot of the actors that aren't part of the conventions anymore. Specifically Mark, who was integral to the concert becoming what it is now compared to what it was, where as far as the sound and the just the overall feel of the show, to amp it up to be more than just a concert at a convention, to make it feel more like an event. And I think that was what a key to making it as special as it is now. Do I index all my photos or just the best ones? Hi, Liz. Liz is amazing. Liz is a integral part of each show. She manages backstage for every show and many of the swing concerts, and she's amazing. One of my favorites. She actually asked if I index all my photos or just the best ones. I actually index everything, and I'm generally hesitant to even delete anything because sometimes something that you think is a goof off on the camera, once you start experimenting with it at home, is, sometimes you realize something works better in black and white, or that something, if you change the angle on it, it's, it takes on a new life. So the biggest key is, we take amazing photos, we have, amazing cameras, is the fact that a lot of us don't protect them. So the key for photography in general is, the images could be amazing, but they're not amazing if you lose them. So I have three hard drives that back each other up, and I actually keep one, at my dad's house just in case, to make sure that, if something were to happen, a flood or fire or whatever else, knock on wood, that you don't lose them, because imagine that would be very sad. Yes, never delete anything. I wish I could answer everything. Someone asked how much fun is the Saturday night special with the band, and I think anyone that's been to a concert at the show realizes on how unique they are, but also that they each have their own personality. So it's a weird thing to explain, but it's what the show is a feeling that is unique for each show. And for me, it's always, the concert for me is always about Rob and what he went through, what he means to me. And to be part of it is amazing. At first I was playing cover songs with them, and obviously I don't sing, so I was playing bass. We were playing Queens of the Stone Age and things like that. And, because I couldn't sing, I felt like I didn't want to take away from the fact that show should be their show. And sometimes that was starting to happen. And so getting to play with them on their songs is amazing. So yeah, so they're incredibly special, and I look forward to them. And yes, we would have been in Chicago. Shit, tonight is the concert. I gotta get there. Someone asked what I do with the photo ops, and so at the end of each show, whatever photos are left over, we have a giant bonfire party, and we bring kind of these hot dogs from imported. They're pretty amazing. No, I take them all home, and then as far as the files go, I have everything going back to the start. So I mean, in that book there will be certain photos from, especially those first couple shows that I think the guys were sitting in chairs and they were in stools, and I think something had happened to Jensen at a show in England, so they were very antsy with security and hesitant. They were really shy at first. Jared not so much, but Jensen, I think, because of what he had gone through with a fan and jumping him, and yeah, so that's part of that history. What show do I love that doesn't have a con? Good question. I grew up, and one of my favorites is Twin Peaks, and I think a lot of influences on Supernatural, which I've never, don't tell anyone, but I haven't seen any episodes of Supernatural, but except for half of the baby one. But it's just I was waiting till it ended, so I've been waiting for almost 8 years. But yeah, Twin Peaks does have a couple events in Washington that get some of the actors together. A lot of them have unfortunately passed away, and Twin Peaks was great. I'm still looking here. Make a series. Yeah, I mean, that could be, it depends on once the selection is over on what images are going to be in each book. I mean, for me, I'm not, one to to really title photos. You know, I kind of like the images to speak for themselves. So I'm not really looking at the book to be a catalog of, you know, this year or this city, opposed to just a group of images that kind of work with each other. But yeah, that's a great question. The best way to avoid noise is earplugs, man. Cosplay logling. Scott is funny. Yeah, Twin Peaks is amazing. All right. Yeah, Twin Peaks is actually on Netflix now. So if you guys want to take a gander, you'll see how, you know, I know because I've spoken to some of the writers, and it's obvious that, you know, Twin Peaks has influenced many shows and video games, even films, and obviously it was David Lynch, who's an amazing director, but great show. But yeah, I love you guys. I will see you next time. I think I have another one coming up soon, but hopefully we'll see what happens, and if we could do this again, I'd love to. But if not, best wishes. Be safe. Love you guys. Peace. Thanks, Warren.